Hey listeners, SHANGHAI here from Multispective, and I'm here to share with you a new episode. This is a guest that I personally know, so I'm really excited that he's come out to share his story on air with all of us. I interview Phil, a trans man who talks about in great detail the process of transitioning, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually, the transition between being born a female and then transitioning into what he feels more comfortable in. He talks about the relationship, the marriage that he's been in pre-transition and post-transition and the effects it had on his marriage. He talks about the effects of that in the workplace in China as well. He talks about his own personal journey, the process of coming out to his family and his friends and his community, and everything that you may want to know, be interested to know, or maybe need to know in your own process of transitioning or coming out. Beautiful episode. He's so raw and he's so vulnerable on the podcast. I know him pre-transition as well. I feel so proud just seeing the way that he has progressed in his own personal journey. He's become and blossomed into such a confident and helpful individual with wonderful resources to offer. So stay tuned, do listen, drop a comment, letting us know what you think. Every comment that you leave to us is feedback for us to do a better job for you. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Multispective. I am so excited to have you on this podcast.
Thank you.
Why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about where you're from and where your story begins?
Where I'm from originally, so I'm British, but I'm one of those third culture kids who truly never grew up in the country of my passport. I was born in Germany, grew up in the Netherlands, went to university in the UK, and then after I qualified as a teacher, a couple of years spent in England, and I moved to China, and I've been out in Asia, primarily Shanghai, since 2008. So that's been quite a while.
Amazing. Do you feel like Shanghai is a place for you? Like you're settled here?
Yeah. I think, even though things have changed in the last couple of years, and I think the economy and lots of other things, shall we say, have made it feel a bit more trying for people, it's definitely getting back to what feels like, quote unquote, more normal life. So yeah, I still love it. I was in Singapore for a couple of years, but I actually missed Shanghai. I missed the crazy and the busyness of a big city. I want to go, it's like, this place is too small. I need to move back somewhere else. So I did in 2014. So here I've been for now another decade.
Wow, that's awesome. And your family, are they in the Netherlands?
I have a brother who's in the Netherlands, and I have some other family here in the UK. So they haven't traveled too far from where we originally were as kids, but yeah. I don't think they've
Okay.
got any ideas that they want to move around, but I'm quite happy in Asia at the moment.
Yeah. It's so funny because like I've had so many conversations with people who are living here, and it's just such a melting pot of just different people from everywhere. And so many conversations I've had here have with individuals have had or said something quite similar where, most of their family is based in one place and have kind of remained, but they were that one curious person that had to just sort of get out of there, be it some
Yeah,
kind of challenge, adversity, or just a
yeah,
curiosity thing, right?
yeah. I mean, for me, it was originally because I still identify as queer, but it was version two of myself, shall we say, in 2008. And I realized that I actually need to escape the confines of how far or how close it is for my parents to come travel to see me. So I wanted to be somewhere completely different. So yeah, that's why I
Yeah.
kind of chose China. And also the
Right.
fact that I wanted there to be a challenge. I mean, I grew up in mainland Europe, so when you speak one or two languages, in that sense, other than English, it's not too difficult to then settle in another country, even if it is another culture. If you speak German, you can understand certain things. If you speak French or Italian or Spanish, so I wanted to do something completely out of my comfort zone. So yeah, China was a big deal. I mean, still is, but it was an even bigger adventure when I didn't know too much about it 15 years ago.
Right. Fair enough. Um, were there moments where you felt or you worried about moving to China with regards your identity and the acceptance of that here? You moved. Yeah.
Not too much. I think it was one of those things when I was trying to find a community to dial into, and there are a couple in the era of Yahoo groups. That's how long I've been out here. So those don't really exist anymore, but they did back then
Yeah.
as one of the only ways of doing things. I always say to people who really don't have an idea of how long I've been here, I said, yeah, I was here before WeChat.
Yeah.
And I was here before
Wow.
translation, and then they just go, and here before line 10 of the metro in Shanghai, and then they just go, oh wait, you've been here a long time. Yes, I
Yeah.
have.
Wow, no, I can't even imagine a world here without WeChat because that is the one thing that connects not only people but us to transportation and
Sure.
payment and
Yeah, yeah,
just everything.
yeah.
Damn, that's crazy. Let's go right back to like your earlier days. What was your
Sure.
relationship like with your parents and your family in general? What are your parents like? Are they quite open-minded in general?
Um, to a degree, yes. I think like everybody, you're more open-minded with other people's kids perhaps than your own, or it's less of a shock, shall we say, if there are certain things that are different about other people's kids than yours. I wouldn't say my parents are conservative massively, um, but I think who I am as a person, certainly how I identify now, even 20 years ago, it was still not something that they found very easy, shall we say.
Do you still have a relationship with them?
Yeah, I don't talk to them much, but they're still my parents, definitely.
Interesting. At what point did it it kind of surface for you, your identity, sort of understanding of your identity kind of surface for you to a point where you were like, I'm going to have to act on this. I'm going to have to do something about this or be open about it. And how was it coming out?
Uh, well, it depends which identity you're talking about,
Yeah.
because you've seen me perhaps do storytelling with Unravel, which was an awesome initiative that sadly it doesn't exist anymore. The people who were originally involved in it, moved away during COVID, and there
COVID,
was
yeah.
nobody else who had maybe the time or the passion that Clara had to be able to run with something like that. So there was me as the queer identity, then there was me as the um, gender identity, were two different things. If we talk about the former, um, I think the stable door opened and it closed a couple of times in my 20s. And my parents were not overjoyed, shall we put it mildly, with that one. Um, but they were sort of reluctantly getting used to it. But who I am now, what I've affirmed myself as, which is a trans man, is not something that they are happy with, shall we say. We don't have a lot of communication because of that. And I didn't tell them. My brother outed me to them um, without my permission. So that I think has had an impact in how my story has been able to be, unraveled with my parents. I think there's a lot of shock and sadness surrounding that because I wasn't the one who was telling them, it was somebody else. And
Right.
so I didn't have control of my narrative. So it's a bit more complex, shall we say.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I just want to clarify. You had a sort of a sexual preference is
Yeah,
I guess the technical term is sexual preference identity understanding happened to you younger at a younger
yeah,
age,
yeah.
and the gender identity was something that came to you later. It wasn't something that when you look back or think back on you can kind of see the patterns from back then.
Um, well, I think as a teenager, I was more aware of possibly who I was attracted to. And then when I was at university, there was this point where I when I volunteered with the LGBTQ society at university, so I did peer-to-peer counseling work there anyway. So I met a lot of different people through that. My neighbor in my halls of residence, the buildings that I lived in, had a best friend who was transitioning at the time. So, even back in 1998, when it was still something that was more of a rarity, shall we say, I had a lot of people that I was associating with, and that's how they identified. And there was some point during my university days when it was more of a slow realization of, I think I want to I think I want to physically alter the way that I look. By that, I mean my chest. But it was just such a weird, confusing, and scary idea to start with that I just went through this cycle for the last, really 20 years of periods of where I wanted to do that, but then I was freaked out as to what the implications were if I did that. I don't know what that means, and I didn't talk to anyone about it. So I just kept on looking at it and then putting it away. So that's kind of how that's evolved.
Interesting. So how did, when you mentioned that you had this sort of idea, perhaps maybe from hearing about it, reading about it, being exposed to it, this idea, this concept of like having the chest surgery was something that sort of triggered. At what point did you go from that idea to realizing that this is more than just one surgery? This is a whole identity thing.
Must have been a couple of years ago. My wife would have said that when we first met, I'd always said that I want to alter how I look. She says, gosh, even back in our early days when we were dating, you told me very clearly that this is not, you're not okay with certain terms. You would be personally affronted if anyone called you a lesbian, because it's just not who you are. You want to alter the way you look, and I don't remember saying that, but she says, oh yeah, I remember very clearly that you told me that. But it was a couple of years ago, no pun intended, when I transformed myself weight loss wise, because that's one of the things that through storytelling I was also talking to people about, and I lost over 40% of my body weight within the space of less than 2 years. And it was just this moment that really truly was transformative. And I thought, well, if I can do that, it just literally, it felt like a burden had been lifted off me. And then I just thought, I want to do something for myself. I'd done it because I wanted to be getting fit before I was 40, and I wanted to look good before I got married. I think, ironically, I'm probably one of the only married people I know that seems to have lost more weight since marriage. It seems to be, wedding before the wedding, and then I kept on going. And I just felt, I can do this. I can just be myself. And I just felt so good about it. And I thought, you know what, I have to stop hiding in this whatever closet, cupboard, dark space I was in, and just live my own life and be happier. So that's when I started inviting other friends into, I suppose, wider circle of not trust, but letting people know about things as it was. And then it was only sort of 18 months ago that I started socially transitioning at work, which was a really, really scary thing to do. I mean, still is, because I'm the only one. I mean, there could be more people, but I believe I'm the only one who identifies as a transgender person at work. So it's different, shall we say.
Yeah. What would you say is your pronoun right now?
Oh, he, him, for sure.
He, him. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. This is so interesting. There's so many little aspects of what you've said today. I'm so impressed by the fact that you started with a physical sort of transformation, and how that empowered you to make bigger changes for yourself, to sort of better feel like you fit in with that identity that you've always envisioned for yourself, or you've dreamed for yourself. So huge props to you, and especially when you're talking about you going through one of the darkest times and And, instead of, for example, using food as comfort or using food in an unhealthy way, you
Yeah.
decided to turn that darkness into something really positive for you, and work out and
Yeah.
lose that weight and,
Yeah.
get yourself to a better place.
Yeah.
So not easy, really not
No,
easy.
definitely not.
Yeah.
I'm very determined.
I like that. Yeah. When was the first time, and can you walk me through that very first time that you came out, as in terms of your sexual preference and your gender identity, the two times that you've come out?
So sexual preference, gosh, I was 16. I was at school. And so, I was growing up in the Netherlands, so not a surprise, even back in the 90s, for people to identify as anything other than, for want of a better term, straight. But at my school, it was still something different. And so they would pick on my brothers. My brothers are 4 to 5 years younger than me. And the first time that something I was alerted to was a problem was my mum came to me and said, "Oh, one of your brothers came home crying," and he said, "Oh, I don't understand this thing that they're saying about my sister." And of course, I was not prepared for that. So I said, "Well, even if I was, it's not true." Um, I mean, okay, I wasn't happy that somebody was picking on my brothers, and I sought out the person and said, "Look, you got a problem. You can pick on me, but don't you dare do that to my brothers. I will make a complaint if you do that." They stopped it pretty quickly. It was, a spineless move to do that. It really was. And then, with regards to how I decided to let people know, hey, this is who I am. These are my pronouns. It was that transition period where, I know, full of fantastic things, right? But it was really in a case of, I think I'm not the only person who doesn't automatically go to, let's say, call me by these pronouns. I know that I'm not the only person that I've met who goes through a period where they say maybe identify as non-binary, maybe can you use they them as the pronouns. I think for me, I certainly did that at work with a couple of people because I wasn't quite sure of what the reaction was going to be. I think when you always feel like you're by yourself in that sense, and you don't know how people are going to react to you. And so it was a case of people going, "Oh, wait, that's a bit strange," but then they just rolled with it. And then it was 3 years ago that I said to a couple of people, "Look," and it really wasn't that. It was about one or two people at work. It was mostly people outside of work that I said that this is who I am, and my friends. I have a small circle of friends, and they said, "Of course, we love you for who you are. It doesn't matter." And then that positive reaction led me to think, at some point, I need to fully transition at work, in that sense socially, because either I want everyone to call me by certain pronouns or I want everyone to call me by these terms. And that was really overwhelming to try and find somebody. How do I navigate that when it's never been done before? There's not a handbook for it. Who do I talk to? So I went on like the HRC and I looked at their guidance for what you would do if you were transitioning in the workplace. I downloaded the PDF. I talked to a certain person in senior management and I sent them this PDF and said, "FYI, I think you need to go and talk about this with everyone else because this is what I'm going to plan to do at some point." And I penned my own coming out letter to all the staff at work. I
Wow.
took it from a couple of different sources. I looked at in terms of what people have done in Australia, what they've done in the US and the UK, and I took elements of all the things that I liked and I added in my own personal touch and I put in some information resources in there as well, what it means to be an ally, what you can and can't say to me. And then I sent it to my principal and said, "Do you have any problem with this being released?" And he said, "Oh no, I'd be delighted to support that." And the first time that I knew that something was happening is about 20 minutes after I'd sent that, I started getting all these emojis on WeChat, and it was going through all these pride emojis and then the cheesiest things that you could find from The Simpsons. And I thought, this is really strange. I'm getting a whole string of way to go messages and
Yeah.
Starbucks rainbow things. And I went, okay, this is freaking me out. Why are people suddenly sending me this on a Monday morning? And then I checked my inbox and he'd sent it out to all the staff. So, hey, the cat was out of the bag.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that though? This was being sent out by
Mm.
you'd asked for permission for you to send them out. Am I right in saying that, or did you ask
Yeah,
them?
yeah. But he sent it out himself. So he took my text and he sent it out. I think because then, the message comes and people will listen and respect it, even if they don't necessarily agree with it when it comes from him. I think if I had sent it
Right.
out, there's a different level of, oh, maybe we don't have to listen to it. So it was verbatim the text that I'd penned that he sent out to everybody, which was, I still blink and go, man, I did that. Um, it was, yeah. I think people would just go, really? You did that all yourself? I said, yeah, no, no, nobody told me to. I just thought I need to do it because enough people were unintentionally misgendering me, and I can't get angry at people if they don't know what pronouns I want to have used. And I
Mm,
also don't want to correct every single person, especially when kids are in the corridor around, because I'm a teacher.
right.
So I just wanted to get it done in one go so that everyone can say, look, this is what you need to do when you see me. This is how you refer to me if you're around kids. This is how, I want to be referred to if it's just, amongst coworkers, and so forth.
Interesting. So, what was it? How did you want to be referred to around colleagues versus around students? How was that different?
Um, I think, looking at, where we are in China, you've obviously got that opportunity where if you wanted to be just called a teacher in the sense of the terminology that you would have, let's say in Chinese, is they would call you, the Chinese word for teacher followed by your surname. And so for me, that was a perfect opportunity to say, look, this is just what I want to be called in English. And of course,
Mm,
for our students who have at least one Chinese parent or have been here for a long time, that's a term that they're quite familiar with. Um, and so some will call me Mr. I won't correct them, but I'm not trying to encourage it because I've been at my workplace for a long time. And so I have a lot of students who are now much older and they've seen me as one identity to then go into another one. Um, I don't want to be the talk of the town. I don't feel comfortable with that. I think
mm,
some parents don't quite know what to make of me when they see me because clearly I look different, I sound different, but they are perhaps too polite to say anything.
right.
But I don't want to make it more obvious than that to people.
Yeah, I find this very interesting. I feel
Mm,
like maybe China, and not only China, a lot of cities haven't just quite got to that place yet where they can be open, welcoming, and actually
yeah,
encouraging of the
yeah,
diverse nature of us human beings. We haven't gotten to that place where it's seen yet in some
yeah,
cultures as
yeah,
let's open arms to this. But we are getting there. We have seen
yeah,
significant changes. Just the mere fact that the company was supportive of this is still ways away from where it used to be, maybe
yeah,
once a while ago, right?
yeah,
So I
yeah,
guess we
definitely.
just take sort of each victory, as it is. Can you walk me through your journey through relationships, dating, romance from the beginning? Did you ever explore relationships with men as well?
Uh, no, no, I didn't.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but my identity is I'm not just attracted to one gender, but that was
Okay.
also a bit of a switch because that wasn't something I was really maybe recognizing as much in my 20s. And now that I'm in my 40s, you hear a lot about it as well when you're taking HRT, that things are different. It wasn't different. It was just the fact that I was less concerned about thinking about other people's perceptions, and it's more about honesty to myself, in that respect. But I think the biggest difficulty has been, obviously, I married a woman, when physically I look different. Transitioning within a relationship, that comes with its challenges too.
What were some of the challenges?
How do you relate to your body? How does the other person relate to you? How does it change attraction, for example? Is that something that they're okay with? Because if you go on this voyage of self-discovery, then it's, oh, well, I don't need to think about you. I'm thinking all about myself. And you become very self-centered, perhaps, because it is, the other person isn't going on the same journey. They're on the outside looking at what's happening to you, but the changes aren't happening to them as much as they're happening to you. So, of course, within the relationship, it changes the dynamic. But for me, when I started taking HRT, when I started thinking about surgery, my wife supports me, but it's still a case of I had to say no when I'm doing preparation for surgery and I'm thinking about things. I'd say I had a 50 item spreadsheet list of all the stuff that I wanted to get done before surgery. And she went, yeah, that was a little extreme. I said, yeah, but you know what? I need to do it for myself. And we'd lead to these arguments of, do you really need to put that much effort into it? I went, well, yes, seeing as I'd had it cancelled twice within China, which is also, a very interesting story. I didn't want the third time to be unlucky, shall we say. I wanted it to go through without a hiccup, which it did.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting, right? Like that dynamic between you and your partner working through it, the kinds of conversations that had to be had between the two of you, and even her having to accept that, hey, this is no longer a relationship that we kind of once had. This is officially going to switch out. And what would that mean for her sexual preference too, sort of being put into this? I can only imagine some of the conversations. Do you feel in like that she was probably that one support, and not only her, but who else did you feel very supported through this process?
I have a couple of very dear gay friends who I've known for a couple of years. I also have somebody I know who I think you have probably connected to, or you've seen before, maybe not on your podcast, but you may have met this person when they were working in China, and they were also, really helpful with questions in the early days when I didn't quite know who to talk to, and in terms of where to look for resources when I was thinking about possibly surgical options within China. Because at first I thought, well, I'll try and get surgery in China, and after the second time that it was cancelled here, I said, I need to look elsewhere. So I had a couple of friends that I was talking to. And then I also I found an app that was set up by this, I suppose you could call him a fitness influencer in that way, Aidan Dowling in the US. And he set up an app for trans and non-binary people and their allies, and he just said, this is a safe space for people to connect. So I ended up talking to people there as well, which is really helpful.
Wow. Yeah, there are a lot of like online and I mean offline for sure as well here in Shanghai, but online communities, and so it's great that we can live in a world where we never really have to be alone, in a sense.
For sure. I mean, I think the only drawback is that a lot of these communities seem to be quite North America based, so time difference is huge. And you can always have an online community, but I think in-person connection is so much better, and that's something that I still feel very alone with. I don't have that here. I think people don't necessarily maybe feel as open about meeting perhaps in person. Certainly I have been part of WeChat groups, so, Chinese social media groups, but the ones there are very full of people who, how can I put it, aren't necessarily always using healthcare professionals to be able to take HRT, and a lot of what they're saying in terms of their advice and recommendations, I think are a little bit dangerous, because it's quite obvious that perhaps they're not. And again, for anyone who's listening, I'm not passing judgment on anybody, because I can completely understand, having been through an experience of going to a hospital here, that I can see that not everyone has access to that. And there are various reasons why people can't access, medical professionals to be able to pursue their desires for how they want to change themselves. I say that because the first time that I went for a surgical consultation here at a hospital, the surgeon and I brought along a friend who is Chinese for translation purposes. And the surgeon said to me through my friend, "Oh, do your parents give consent for this procedure?"
Can we just say one more time, how old were you when this happened? You were above 18, right?
41.
Wow.
Yeah. And my friend said, yeah, just maintain a poker face, smile, because I don't want to give them the wrong impression. And I just said, yeah, smiling as much as I could, trying not to portray shock, absolutely. And what transpired is, and this is the reason why, to draw it back to the WeChat issue, and in terms of how people give advice to each other, and the types of things that they're pursuing to be able to have those physical changes that they want, is that it turned out that they didn't want to get sued, the hospital. So what seems to be quite commonplace is to be able to pursue a medical procedure, to be able to take, for example, HRT, you have to get your parents to sign a form which explains what you want to have carried out. And that obviously is going to be a major issue with regards to safety for people if they're not if they haven't let their parents into who they are. And then the first acknowledgement of who they are is a form from a hospital. That's going to create a huge issue. And so there's obviously reasons why people don't choose to pursue that route, or it may be cheaper to pursue alternative routes. For me, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I didn't have to go down that route. I eventually had surgery in the US. But the translation barrier and, just that alone could have put a lot of people off. I tried twice to get surgery here, because I thought, well, if I can recuperate, at home, I don't need to travel anywhere. That would be so much better for me. I'd feel really comfortable. But the misgendering and the assumptions and the stereotyping that I was getting from the surgeon's assistant, shall we say, not the surgeon himself, just made me think, I don't feel safe having a procedure here. I really don't feel that it's going to be what I want. I don't think they understand why I'm doing it. I think they're just looking at it as money in the bank. They're not truly understanding, the impact that it would have on me, and therefore the fact that I want to get it right the first time, which is why when I had a consult last spring in Seattle, and the surgeon went, "Oh, I totally get what you want to do." I think she was shocked that I had to I told her the story about permission, and I told her the experiences I'd had in China, and she said, "Oh no, we'd never do that here. Absolutely not." If I'd said to them, because I like working out a lot, so I said, it's really important for me that the type of sutures that I'm going to get, or the way that you're going to obviously connect all the skin together up after surgery, for me, that I don't necessarily look like I'm going to be advertising for Sports Illustrated, but it also doesn't look like I'm Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And he said, because in China, when I said that to the surgeons, he said, well, it just depends on the experience of the person on the day who's doing the sutures. And I think if my
That's
eyebrows
what it
were
comes down to.
on my forehead, they probably would have, because I thought, really, on the experience of the person, oh hell no, I'm just not going to do that. That was one.
Yeah.
If in a cartoon, if I could have left in a cloud of dust, I probably would have, but that really
Yeah.
petrified me. Um, and
Yeah,
especially
of
when he was
course.
drawing things on little pieces of paper and he was looking through his surgical calendar, which was in a sheaf of papers and not on a computer, I thought, oh no, this is just not going to work. I cannot
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
Um, and so all of these questions I was asking the surgeon in Seattle, I think she looked at me as if I was slightly unhinged. I went, yeah, but the reason I'm asking about this is I just had these wild experiences. So when she knew that background, she went, oh, I understand, because nobody usually asks questions about sutures. We'd always do them as dissolvable. They'd always be like this.
Yeah.
Um, and she said,
Right.
you can have a choice of this or that. At that stage, because I'd had two failed surgeries, and I felt, at that point, on a darker note, I'd felt very suicidal after the second time, because I'd psyched myself up. I got permission from work to have time off work to have the surgery. I'd worked out how long I'd need to potentially be off work before coming back to work. I'd tried to work out if I could choose the times to have it before Christmas, combine it with a couple of weeks of work, Chinese New Year, long period of recuperation, and then it fell through. And I just felt really desperate and said, I need this. I don't think I've ever felt like I've needed something before. So
Right.
when I have this surgeon who just goes, oh, yeah, well, you work out, so we got more of a canvas to work with sometimes than some of my other patients. And I said, well, can you put the sutures underneath my pecs so that they don't look like they're scarring too much? He says, oh, sure, we can do that, no problem. Um, and
Yeah.
it felt so good to just be able to, with what is a regular procedure for her to do, it just felt so good that I felt like I could trust in the process, and that the outcome, you can't control it, but it was going to be as good as it possibly could be.
Yeah.
And you
Can,
need
can
that
you
peace of
walk me
mind.
through like sort of what were the steps that you took in terms of the transition, medically transitioning? You started off with HRT. Was there
Yeah,
anything else that you took prior to the surgery? I'm guessing the surgery was the last thing you done, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I started off taking the oral form of testosterone first of all.
Is that a
Um,
pill?
yeah, it's a pill.
Okay.
So they're little brown pills. You have to take them with fat, or you have to take they're lipophilic, so they absorb better when you consume with fat, because of the way that it's, I suppose, manufactured, and the way it's designed to work with you. So
And
then I had.
what were
Mhm.
the first sort of uh, differences did you notice on your body when you started taking those pills, and how long did it take before you started noticing the changes?
I think within a couple of months, I think my voice didn't sound. I couldn't reach high notes when I was singing. So I think it was a little bit like a teenage boy whose voice is breaking.
Cracking, yeah.
At a certain point, I tried to sing and I went, "Oh yeah, that's really not pretty. It sounds like I'm squeaking, so I'm just not going to try and sing anymore."
But that must have been a really joyful moment, though, even though it was,
It was, but it was kind of a bummer, because I do like singing, so I can sing, but
right.
I'm not a baritone, but I'm definitely a lot lower than I was. And
Yeah.
then the next thing I noticed was, we gave my facial hair a nickname, so we used to call it Tiny Tash, because it was just like a couple strands. So we gave it a
Love it.
nickname and a hashtag.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have anything on my neck, but in the last maybe like 6 months, it started growing in, and so now we call it hashtag neck fluff, as well, because the changes are not uniform to everyone taking things. You could have super bushy eyebrows, you could have thinning hair, perhaps, which, touch wood, at the moment I don't have. It still provides a bit of a stop and think moment at passport control when they go, wait, hang on, your hair in this passport is shoulder length, and are you the same person? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Did you ever
yeah.
end up changing your documents, or are you in the process of doing that now?
I'm not, because it would cause difficulties or knock-on effects here, because if you change your documents, you have to change everything that you use to register with as in your chosen profession. So all of your university transcripts, all of your diplomas, all of those things would also have to change. Otherwise, you wouldn't be the same person, legally speaking.
Oh, right.
So for me, it's the awkward discomfort. Let's say if I go to particularly a medical appointment that I just have to deal with. Depending on who it is, I think they've tried to put notes in the system to say, please don't refer to this patient as this. Just try to refer to him as that, if possible. It is quite interesting sometimes when I've gone to pay for hospital bills and they say, oh, are you settling the bill for your wife? When, yeah, no, that's me. I'm settling the bill for. And they just pause and go, oh, so sorry.
Yeah.
Please don't say that out loud. It just makes me feel
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like though that's the one last thing that you feel like you need in order to complete that transition, or are there other sort of things that you still want to explore and to not explore but to like, to complete that cycle?
Um, it's not necessarily that I would say viewing it as complete, because I think, transition could be so different for everybody. It's such a deeply personal journey. I've met people who don't take any medication, but they identify and they affirm themselves as trans men and trans women. And I've met some for whom having multiple procedures is necessary for them to feel like they're their true selves. For me, perhaps it is the start of a journey. In that sense, medically, maybe I haven't done everything that I want to, but in terms of socially, I think for me the biggest issue was always feeling like I can be myself at work with my colleagues and that senior management know who I am. And I just want it to be a non-issue, to be honest.
Yeah.
If I was in a Western country, I think I would be more vocal about maybe wanting to start a group or maybe advocate more for certain things. But here, we know that things are different, and
Yeah.
wider society is not aware of what I am. They just they see for lack of a better term, the stereotypical gender presentation of you have short hair, you have some facial hair, your chest looks like this, your voice sounds like that, therefore you must be a man, which I am, and that's all I really need, so that I don't get shouted at when I go into the men's changing room, which prior to surgery last summer, going into the men's changing rooms would have been really awkward. Going into men's
Yeah.
bathrooms was also feeling awkward, but equally going into the women's didn't feel right either. So it's just a case of, bathroom phobias and issues are something that trans people, it's so widely in the news how difficult that can be. So I would just have to be one of those people who searched out for the disabled bathroom somewhere as the place that I could go to. And if I didn't, just have to bravely suck it up and go to whichever bathroom was available and just avoid the stares and try and ignore the cleaning lady shouting at me in Chinese that I was either in the right or the wrong bathroom, and everyone else.
Yeah.
It's stressful.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Especially because over here there are no trans bathrooms or bathrooms that are non-gender specific. So yeah, I
Yeah,
can imagine that
yeah.
really being such a challenge for you at some point,
Hmm.
especially when you were
Hmm.
sort of like looking one way or looking another way, or ambiguous in that sense, right, to other
Yeah,
people. Yeah.
yeah.
What are some other sort of like infrastructural challenges you find over here, or that you would wish could be more inclusive for trans people?
Um, Infrastructure in what aspect? I think for me, I think just being able to just have the correct pronouns used for me when I go to a medical appointment would just be a very simple thing. Um, so that I don't get called Mrs. I don't get called Miss. It's clearly not who I am.
Yeah.
Um, really, really minor things would just be so much easier because
Yeah.
I go to some medical appointments and they'll just call me by my preferred name, which is awesome, and nothing else because I go there so regularly. I might go to somewhere else and they have to follow protocol, they have to follow what's on your passport, and then they always have to come and double check my name with me because they're not sure it's the same person. Minor things like that, I think, would make people feel more comfortable. In a wider way, changing your documents, that's not something that can be easily fixed, logistically. And from a legal point of view, I guess that if you do change your passport, then if everything is in a former name, you have to get everything changed. Otherwise, everything that says who you are, as in
Yeah.
whatever profession you are claiming to be a member of, you have to get it all changed. And that's not something that's easy. And I think certainly that's one of the difficulties of being so far away from, in inverted commas, home, or the UK, is the fact that it's time difference. It's not being able to go up and take a weekend or a day off work to try and visit these places, to do stuff in person, to expedite a process. It's do you do it around holidays? Those type of things are just, it's a fact of life. It's going to be harder because I'm an expat. So it's not
Yeah.
something I'm pursuing at the moment. But for the fact that my passport runs out in a couple of years, so really, I think then is the time to change things anyway. So working up to getting everything lined up in a row so that within a couple of years I can do that. I think would probably be a realistic timeline for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I find this so awesome because, in a way, like yeah, living here in China can be quite challenging, especially
Yeah,
as an expat. You need visas, you need like
yeah,
all of these kind of things that everything sort of
yeah.
ties in with the old version of you. But having to and while you mentioned maybe a physical change has led to the community and the society sort of accepting who
Yeah.
the new version of you is to an extent, maybe that's helped you with being more comfortable and
Yeah,
confident about where you are and who you are now. But
definitely.
those few little nitty gritty things that just kind of like continue to hold you back, and you're like, I just
Hmm.
want to finish,
Yeah,
be done
yeah,
with that part of my life, right?
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. For me, my marriage is not legally recognized here because on paper I'm a woman. So if it was, then my wife, who suffers from anxiety and depression and sometimes has acute episodes, if I was considered to be legally a man on paper, then she could be a dependent, and we could, make some financial adjustments, and then, I could say to her, take a year off or go and do something that's 50%, or do something that makes you feel that you're contributing to our household income, but it doesn't have to be full-time work. It's things like that I wish I could do that I'm powerless to do in my current, call it legal limbo for want of a better term. So stuff like that I would love to be able to do,
Yeah.
because then she would feel that, if in her current job, if the stress got too much and I just said, look, jack it in, I can support us,
Yeah.
legally, you're going to
Visa
be
would be.
okay, and I
Yeah.
can't do that right now.
Yeah. What about children?
um Again, not something that's really possible. I think, we're both in our 40s, so the only option would be adoption, but again, you can't do that, legally on paper here, at least. I'm still a woman, so that's not an option that can be pursued. I also find it very overwhelming to try and navigate where would I look at possibly wanting to adopt from. Because if I'm looking, for example, to the US, where my wife's from, every state is different, and I'm not quite sure what to do in terms of what am I looking at and how do I start. And if you wanted to get home studies done, I think there are people here within Shanghai that probably could do that for you, but I don't even know what agency you would look at. And all of these things are just so overwhelming because I'd love to be a parent. I just don't know if it's going to be something that's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to maintain not even a pretense, but I shouldn't feel that there's going to be a consequence for just revealing to somebody what I am. And again, people that I know don't always reveal who they are. They don't say to their employer or people they're working with, I'm transgender. It's absolutely personal to everybody.
Yeah.
There may be a safety aspect to that. They don't feel that they want to, reveal that to people. It's so complex, the reasons why people do or don't disclose as much or as little information as they do. And certainly for me, the only reason why, in addition to feeling like I was being unintentionally misgendered at work, was I just wanted to just not have to talk about it in that respect. It's just another aspect of me, but I wanted to feel safe in being able to say it once. And then that was it. But certainly when I'm going to, a new place, a new school to work at, I feel that I have to tell my prospective employers, by the way, this is who I am, just so that I feel protected. And so they know fully who I am, and they can decide if that's somebody that they're willing to employ. And if they don't, it's good that I know then, because then that's clearly a school I'm never going to want to work at. And if they do, that's an indication of hopefully more open-minded thinking, more diverse attitudes. And therefore it means that I feel that I can fully start in confidence, and, everything else can follow on from that. But that's the biggest thing to me, is feeling protected. And sometimes here, you don't think about that because I don't feel like I experience discrimination. You can choose the hospital that you go to if you've got private medical insurance. You can choose the doctors you want to go to. If you don't like a particular doctor, you can change, the doctor you're seeing to a certain degree. And so I don't feel like I experience, or haven't yet experienced consciously, the discrimination or the attitudes that people might experience, abroad. I'm quite lucky, touch wood, in that respect. It's not been a major trauma or hassle for me yet.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting, because I did an episode with a transgender woman who's also based in Shanghai. I believe I've spoken to you about her before, Ray. And she also talked about the difficulties that she experienced with the medical side, or the medical aspect of it. But she was sort of on the same sort of wavelength as you, in the sense that, she's really found communities of people, groups, societies that have been very supportive, as opposed to in the US. And you would think, right, ironically, like in the US, they are very open-minded. It's all, free speech, freedom of, expression, and blah, blah, blah. And, typically it's known that that's not the case here. It being legal in other places, where it, being a gray area over here, yet people have been able to find more comfort here, despite the difficulties, than in a place like in the US, where there's more fear around, transphobia, or, people actually acting on it in a very explicit sort of manner.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Definitely. For sure. And I think also you don't have that aspect of religion and politics coming into the mix here as much as you do in the States, and how a lot of these absolutely horrendous bathroom bills, the bills that are targeting trans youth, the bills that are targeting trans adults and non-binary people, in terms of access to healthcare, access to being able to feel that they can get their driver's license, their official ID in the state issued with the gender marker of their choice. All of these things are going to be so complex, and as to the reasons why people wouldn't feel safe in certain states and feel that they need to move to other communities. I know people who started off life in one state, then moved to another, then these bills started getting enacted, and they said, I need to move. This is not safe for me. If I'm going to have to be forced to travel however many 100 miles to get, my medication, if it's going to become illegal for the medication to be sent to me via mail, if I'm not allowed to use a telehealth provider, I have to use an in-person. They're making it so difficult, and it's why we considered to be evil and an object of hate and fear is the message that I would get as a trans person in the US, and not necessarily the US in particular, but it's the one where there's so much in the news. It seems like every day there's something else that pops up on Instagram where the HRC are saying these are currently, let's say, 400 bills that are being passed or attempting to be passed at various levels in states around the US with regards to things that are very transphobic agenda. And I would fear, certainly depending on what state I lived in, I would really fear for my existence and my ability to be myself. And you don't have that extra layer of complexity that I'm aware of here in China. There are other attitudes, cultural attitudes, perhaps societal attitudes, and that's something else that's different. But yeah, you're right. You don't have that extra complexity in terms of being a trans person here, I think, or at least in my experience. And again, I don't know what it would be like if I was in the States. I mean, where my wife is from in Seattle, I think I would feel very comfortable and accepted. But then if I went a couple of hours east into the deepest part of Washington State, I might feel not safe, even though on paper the state is run by a Democratic governor. They're very pro-LGBTQ. They're very... It's very interesting and different.
For sure.
So yeah, you're right. It is. Yeah, you experience things in a different way here, I think, is the easiest way to say it.
Phil, final plugins. Give us a little message that you would like to impart with our listeners. Ways that we can either support the community, or for individuals that might be undergoing the motions right now of their own identity. What kind of message would you like to impart to our listeners today?
I would say, if you are feeling like you're coming to a realization, I don't want to term different, but if who you are realizing you are now is different to the person you were even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, radically different to who you were as a child, if you're questioning your gender, if you're really questioning what is that very essential part of you, I would say it really is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's something that I remember having sleepless nights over. But just find that one person. You just need that one person that you can connect to. Whether it's somebody at work, whether it's, a pen pal that you have, whether it's somebody that you go work out with at the gym, you just need to be able to talk to one person. And when you have that one person that you can feel safe with, then you can grow from there. Have faith that you will be able to connect to somebody. There will always be someone out there, I guarantee you, who will accept you as you are and will help you. And if you are considering making that what can be a very daunting first step, I even said to it yesterday, somebody, it felt like jumping off a cliff with a blindfold on, because you don't know what is at the end. Just have faith that you know who your friends are, and there will always be that one person who you can connect to that will help you, and then you don't feel alone. And I think that's the biggest issue, is when you have such big questions about yourself and where you go, it's so hard to do it by yourself. And the moment you can find a community, however small it is, things just become so much easier, and then just take it one day from a time from there.
Yeah. One last question. I really want to ask you this. there will be people along the way that may have a very
Yeah.
difficult time accepting, and
Yes.
there will be people that you may find you can no longer connect with, and you may end up losing in your life. But
Yeah.
looking back, do you have any regrets about that, or would you do it again over and over if you could?
My only regret is that I didn't feel brave enough to admit who I was to myself 20 years ago. I think I'm doing it still in my 40s. I think it would have been perhaps easier to do it in my 20s, before I started on my career that I'm on, before, I really became who I am, in terms of where do I want to go with life, marriage, kids, etc. But I have to remind myself it's not really helpful to torture myself about the what ifs of a couple of decades ago. Things were different. If I was a person in their 20s today coming to this realization about who I am, certainly from a Western society perspective, you hear about it so often. It would be not okay if you experience transphobia in the workplace. It would not be okay within wider society if you were being discriminated against with access to medical services, with access to anything else, because society's attitudes have changed. And that has, even though it is still overwhelming for people to realize who they are, to affirm their true identity, it's a lot easier to navigate those first steps and then to go over those logistical hurdles than it was had I decided to be braver and bolder about it 25 years ago, for example. So it's not really a regret. Sometimes it is, but you can't regret the what ifs because you don't know what the past would have been like if it had been different. It's just a looking back and just, I have to pinch myself and go, damn, I did this in China. I'm doing this in China. It's not something that normally people do when they're in China. I'm still doing it. So I have to congratulate myself for doing that when there was no LGBTQ center here that you could go to. Let's say if you're in LA, you'd have that resource to go to, which is why my endocrinologist says, you are the most informed patient that I have. She says, I think you intimidate me sometimes with your questions. I went, it's not intentional, but I don't have a resource to go to, so I have to Google everything, and then I have to come to you with the questions. The man in between. So apologies. I think she views that as a very interesting academic conversation when we talk to each other. But she knows that my curiosity and my questions are coming from a good place, and she understands why I'm asking them, because I don't have those access to resources that people outside of China may have.
Yeah. Phil, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your story. It's not easy being vulnerable, so I really, really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Hope it helps somebody.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Chris Trzynski, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.